welcome back, everybody. Tonight we're going to talk about the product development life cycle, but specifically the product selection portion. I'll do another video later with all the product development steps and things like that in a managed service provider. But tonight I wanted to talk specifically about selecting the product once you're in that phase of product development. Um, from my perspective, there's two basic steps to product selection. You have a technical evaluation and you have a business evaluation. I like to do the technical evaluation first because if the product doesn't pass this, the business evaluation is fully irrelevant, right? Like something can be fundamentally sound from a business perspective and the financial side, but if it sucks, it sucks. So I like to start with the technical evaluation, and this is sort of how I go about it. Step one is understanding if the tool you're looking at or the product you're looking at actually solves the identified problem. And this is where most things are already off the rails in most MSPs, right? Like we get back from conferences, we get bombarded with salespeople who are telling you they have a product that solves a problem. If you were only told the problem existed because a salesperson from a vendor told you the problem existed, it's probably not a problem your customers care about right now. So if you have not identified a problem you're trying to solve, and you have not identified who you're trying to solve that product for, right? Is this a SMB play? Is this a middle market play? Is this something that 10% of your customers are having an issue with, or 1% or 50%? If you did not come to the conference with the idea of that stuff in mind, then you're probably not solving a problem. And what you're going to end up selling to customers is the idea that they have a problem and therefore should buy your solution. That's a lot harder than just bringing a solution to a problem they already understand they have, right? So, step one is if you have not identified the problem and you have not identified who has that problem and who you're solving it for, stop already. Stop evaluating the tool, put it away, or at least don't call it product development. Just call it checking out cool shit. Like that's okay too. Sometimes I take vendor calls because I want to check out cool shit. It has nothing to do with me wanting to sell it. I just like neat things. I'm a nerd. So that's okay. And if you want to take those calls, that's on you. You spend your free time however you want, but it's not product development. If you're doing product development, you have an identified problem and an identified who. If you have those things, you have a clear understanding of what the problem is. Does the product you're looking at right now solve that problem in theory? If it does, take the next step. Look at the product and understand how does it rate against its competitors, right? What are the alternatives out there? Generally speaking, I like to look at 3 to 5 products that I believe will solve the problem. I look at them from a cursory level, right? I check out their website. I look at the feature lists. A lot of vendors are really good about showing off the things they believe they shine at. And from there, I might demo 1 to 3 of the products. I want to get a good feel for the products, but I'm not going to demo all 5. It's just too time consuming. Um, from there, I might choose the top 2 to pass on for a formal business evaluation, right? And one of those 2 is probably going to be my selection, unless something goes haywire with both of them. Um, be sure when you're in this phase, you're measuring the product against the problem. One of the issues a lot of people have is they get razzle dazzled in these demos, right? You go out and you buy a vulnerability scanner, and it's like, we'll patch your stuff too. That's cool. That's a lot of value, but you already probably have a patching tool. So you can't let overlap add value to something for you. Not all the features are going to bring you value, and you should measure the product for the feature set you will use to solve the problems. If you can eliminate other tools along the way, sure, add that to your math, right? But for a lot of us, like with the example of the patching tool, it's built into our RMM. If we're using our RMM for that, we probably don't need another tool to do patching. If we're going to remove it from our RMM and fully migrate it over, you have to have that discussion and evaluate now as a patching tool, not a vulnerability management tool. So understand what problem you're trying to solve and measure the tool's capability to solve that problem. All the ancillary stuff is nice and you can look at it as value adds, but your primary focus has to be the ability to solve that problem because that's ultimately what your customer is going to buy, right? Then the third thing, once you understand the technicalities of it, and be sure you really dive in. Like I want to kind of emphasize MSPs and most businesses don't need the absolute top of the line bleeding edge technical tool. They need one that solves the problem consistently and for the broadest set of customers within that target, right? Don't think you have to have the absolutely best tool. And step 3 of this is the reason why. How effectively can you manage it, right? Is this tool designed for MSP management? And what that means almost always is the tool compatible with your existing tool set? Can it generate tickets in your PSA? Can it generate reports to your reporting tool, right? If you're using Brightgauge, does it integrate with Brightgauge? If you're using Lifecycle Insights, can it pull data into there for you? How is it multi-tenant? There are so many tools out there that get sold that have no true multi-tenancy, and it will always fail you as an MSP if it's not multi-tenant, right? So how effectively can you truly manage this? Is this going to be a standalone tool that has zero integration with your other stuff? Your cost is going to be absurdly high, so it absolutely better deliver on all that value because you're going to be spending a tremendous amount to manage it, right? Are you adding synergies with your tools or removing them? And I know synergies is a goofy buzzword, but that's the reality. Like, is integrating this tool and making your stack more solidified and unified? And is it adding efficiency so you're removing layers of work and because of that integration? Or are you saying, well, now I'm going to need to get another sysadmin just to manage this tool, and it's going to be 50% more work because it doesn't integrate with anything, or I'm going to have to build these integrations or whatnot. So, how effectively can you manage it? Are you is your team capable of actually doing the work this tool is supposed to do? In the security space, we see this all the time. We buy security tools like a SIM, but we don't train the help desk or the service desk how to actually manage security alarms. So what you end up with is a really expensive tool that has all these cool features that you can sell to a customer, and then you turn it off because you don't have a team that can actually effectively manage that stuff. So, do you have the ability to not just manage the tool, but actually manage the work the tool generates? Because if you're buying a tool, it better be doing something. What does the training look like? What's the development of your team look like from that perspective? What does the deployment of the tool look like? Is this one of these things that you can actually roll out really quickly, or is this going to take a long time to phase in? Every MSP owner I've ever met believes these tools can be rolled out in, a week. They're like, boom, we'll roll it out to 100 customers, no problem. This will be onboarded in a month, no big deal, because that's what the vendor said. A year later, you have 10% of the deployment done and everybody hates it, right? So be truthful. How can you manage this? What's the game plan? How does it get backed up? Where does the data live? What other infrastructure do you need to build? Do you need new servers? Is this on premise? Is it in the cloud? How will you know if it's working? How do you know when it needs repair? How are you patching it? All those things come into play, right? Like, if you need to build a server on the customer site for this to work, who's paying for that infrastructure, right? A lot of tools, especially on the security side, need infrastructure on premise to scan environments, to collect logs. How does that all play in? Is it an appliance? Right? Is the plan to drop it into customers' existing VM infrastructure? So will the customer pay for those resources? What about if they're in the cloud? Who picks up the bill for that? If it's in Azure, if it's in a private data center, how are you managing and implementing this stuff? All very, very important. And how you manage it will often outweigh how technically proficient the tool is, right? There's going to be a minimum level of technical proficiency that the tool has to meet. A router has to route, a switch has to switch. But if you're looking at, say, an HP Aruba switch versus a Cisco switch, at most levels, the technical differences aren't what makes the difference. It's your familiarity with the technology and your ability to manage it, right? If you're looking at EDR platforms, as long as you pick one of those normal standard quality EDRs, right? It doesn't matter if you're picking, Sentinel One or Huntress if you want an MDR, or Microsoft Defender. It's which one can you deploy and manage effectively. Yes, they all have different ratings if you look at things like MITRE evaluations and things like that. But if you're looking at like Palo Alto, 40 EDR, Microsoft Defender, any of these big ones, they're within 5 or 10% of each other from a technical proficiency level. Your ability to manage and execute is going to very much close that gap, right? If you can't monitor it to know it's running properly, if you don't know how to work the console, if you don't know how to react to the alarms and investigate, it doesn't matter that one was 5% better. It's not going to be implemented correctly. So it's going to be 0% better and probably 100% worse. So, how can you effectively manage the tool is more important than closing that 5 to 10% technical competency gap. And again, the feature set that you're looking at, it doesn't matter if one has 800 features and one has 80 if you're not going to use the other 700. It's just smoke that people are blowing to get you to buy their product. So pay attention to what you actually need and know that before you go into the conversation. All right, so once you kind of dive in and get that technical evaluation done, you need to move on to a business evaluation. And yes, it matters, right? Again, if it doesn't technically check all those boxes, throw it in the trash. It's irrelevant. But once you're there and you're down to those one or two things, look at the costs. How much does it cost? Cost matters. Everything has a value, right? Compared to the alternatives, how much does it cost? Are you buying a best in class product that is a little bit more expensive but has a lot more compatibility and capability to manage? It's probably worth paying a little more. Are you paying top dollar because it's a cool brand name that you think will help sell, but you're not really good at managing it? It's probably not worth it to you because you can't manage things they're going to cancel anyway. So, how much is the cost, and understand what those costs look like? Understand what's paying for the product. In the MSP space, we buy things for lots of reasons, right? Are we buying a tool that's going to increase our efficiency, right? Does it make my staff faster? Tools like Lion Guard and things like that, IT Glue, all the documentation solutions like Hoodoo. These are all things that help us run our business more efficiently. So as a result, we're evaluating a tool to make us faster. And the idea is we get billable capacity back or utilization back as the trade off and the ROI. So maybe we absorb the cost with under the context that we can then sell more time elsewhere and make that money back, right? Are we reducing our own risk? Is the ROI here that we're protecting ourselves from potential damages or downtime? Again, that's a fair ROI. As long as the return on and the reduction in our risk to ourself goes down enough to pay for the product, cool. Or are you evaluating a tool for a customer benefit, right? Is this going to make the customer more efficient? Are you evaluating something like a new file share or a new VPN technology or SD-WAN technology, something that when you sell to the client it increases their capability? How do you explain to the customer what that ROI is so they understand that the price with it raises their efficiency level to make it worthwhile? Or are you selling a solution that reduces the customer risk? That's your typical EDR or your security stack, right? You're saying, I'm selling you this thing. You're not going to get a financial increase as a result, but the likelihood that you lose money is going to go down because you're better off and more protected. So you have to understand how you're paying for this product. Is a customer paying for it because they are going to get more money as a result? Are they paying for it because they're going to lose less money as a result? Or are you paying for it because you believe by implementing it, your team can go make you more money? Or are you implementing it because you believe you will lose less money over time because it reduces your risk somewhere? Identify what is paying for the product and make sure that aligns with your strategy of bringing it to market or implementing it. And ultimately, figure out how you can bill for it. This one bites a lot of people. If you buy a tool that is not MSP friendly, you're going to end up in a position where reconciliation and invoicing sucks, right? You have to be able to invoice your clients for these things on a regular basis. If it's a per seat license, you need to have a good count of how many the customer are using so you can invoice for it. Ideally, it trickles into your billing solution, right? If you're using ConnectWise, you want some methodology of it updating the agreements automatically. You want something simple here. That way, stuff doesn't just fall through the cracks. You want a way to reconcile this. How easy is it for you to say, all my customers have this many licenses, and this is how many I'm paying the vendor for, right? You need to be able to look at that and make sure you're not overpaying your vendor or underbilling your customers. Reconciliation is important. Lots of people bleed cash because they don't get these two things right. Understand if there's minimum investments. Do you have to buy 500 seats? And do you have a plan to genuinely sell all 500 of those seats? A lot of people say things like, yeah, I'll get there no problem. They roll out 200 and their math is based on them selling 500. And then all of a sudden their costs are more than double and the profitability is gone. You have to understand what your minimums are and what that ramp really looks like. Work with the vendor. A lot of times they'll give you ramp ups, but you better be confident in your ability to fulfill them or adjust those minimums. And if you're not sure, target a really low minimum and a really high cost, because at least then you have some wiggle room from a margin perspective. You can always reduce costs later if it's not working out, if you're having a hard time selling it, right? But you don't want to set yourself in a position where your cost from the vendor is set at 1,000 seats. You can't make the 1,000 and now you're just losing cash on the deal. What are the terms of cancellation? NCE comes to mind when we talk about this one that bit a lot of MSPs, right? If the cancellation term is you can't get out of the contract with the vendor, but your contract says your customer can leave you, you're in a bad spot because you ultimately you're holding that bag, right? So make sure the terms of cancellation on the product are in alignment with how you sell the product and how you would contract with your customer. If it's a 1-year term, you better have a 1-year term with the customer or you're going to be left holding a bag, right? And we won't want to do that. So make sure that the terms of purchase are in alignment with the terms of sale, or at least in your favor as the MSP. And then finally, make a decision and then leave it alone. This is where another area MSPs fail a lot of the time in, right? Every year a new better product will come out. Something shiny will be added. AI is going to get added to everything this year. It doesn't mean that you should change your product. It starts at the problem that life cycle, right? Is there a problem you're trying to solve? If there isn't, just let it be. Write out that efficiency build, right? If there's a problem, like a genuine problem, it's no longer meeting the needs sufficiently, evaluate it and do this process again, but don't just evaluate it because some new cool thing popped up. This is the worst thing you can do. MSPs are about standardization and efficiency. That's how we turn profitability. The minute you start changing off another product, you lose both of those things. You've lost all the training time, you've lost all the efficiencies built in if you've gotten there, you've lost any automation, right? You've lost all that investment and standardization, and now you're going to move to a new product and restart that cycle. The longer you can stick with a single product, as long as it's fulfilling its need effectively, the better off you generally are, because you don't have to retrain staff, you don't have to redeploy, you don't have to do any of that stuff. You can maintain that standardization and build efficiencies around it versus rotating a product every year because you saw a new shiny EDR, right? Like this happens all the time where everybody sees a new, better security product. They end up with 10 SIMs, 10 backup products, 10 EDRs. I've seen companies with 3 different RMMs deployed because they really thought the next one was going to change their business. No, how you manage the tool changes your business, not which tool you have. So once you make a decision, don't even look at it again for 2 years. And at that 2 year mark, you're really just looking at your pricing to make sure you're in alignment with what everything you did. Evaluate it after a year and make sure your pricing looked good and you don't have to adjust it internally. But don't even think about changing it for 2 years unless something really catastrophic happens, because you're going to have lost all that work, and it's going to take you at least a year to figure out if it's working or not, truthfully, and to get good data so you can make another evaluation. So plan to just let it ride for 2 years unless something drastic changes. And that's sort of, that's how I go about product selection. There's a lot more around the product development lifecycle, picking when to target stuff, what kind of things to look at, how you should be evaluating tools internally in relation to your goals and your organization. But from a product selection perspective, this is the method I like. It's what I would suggest. Vendors, if you're watching this, go get all those answers before you call me. I get, a call every day about somebody who wants me to evaluate a product. And, if they don't meet all this criteria, I'm just not talking to them. If they can come to the table and tell me, yep, I've checked all these boxes, I saw your video, I'll probably schedule a meeting with you if I'm looking for a problem to solve. And if not, I'm going to tell you, hey, I'll call you in a couple of quarters if I decide that your problem, the problem you're saying you can solve, is the one I care about right now. But watch the video, pay attention. Don't call me unless you have. But for everybody else, how does this stack up against your product development lifecycle, your product selection process? Yeah, comment, leave shoot some questions over if you have them. But otherwise, have a great night.